Hey guys, I want to take a short moment to make another video, and I'm going to kind of do a series of these being called Back to Basics. So today what I want to focus on is probably one of the most basic pieces to all of culinary, and that's knife skills. How to use knives, the proper way to cut things, and what generally like the best knives are for the kitchen. So in general, I would always advise anybody to not go to the store like your Walmart or your Target, what have you, and don't buy the like block with like the 14 different knives and 24 knives, 12 knives, whatever it is. You get like all these knives for X amount of dollars. Generally it's like 50, 60, 70 bucks for some of those nicer ones. But the reason I tell you not to do that is for the vast majority you're not going to use 90% of those knives. Generally in a kitchen, when you're cooking, especially at home and you're not in like a true culinary setting, you're going to use a chef knife 99% of the time. And chef knives have a slightly different look to all of them. So this is a KitchenAid chef knife that I have. It's actually my favorite knife in my collection. But then I've got another one that looks like this. So it's a little lighter, doesn't have as much weight to it. It's all seamless one piece. It's a bit of a cheaper knife also. And then I've got another one of these, which is Chicago Cutlery. This is another one of my preferences. The blade gets dull kind of quick, but I like the hand feel of it. So this is like your traditional chef knife. You're going to use this, like I said, for most everything that you do culinary wise. And I'm going to be attaching a link to a pretty sweet knife set on Amazon that's really affordable. It's going to give you those basics. If you're at home and you've got one of those knives that are real flimsy, they don't hold a blade good, it was a cheap knife, I'd really, if you're going to be cooking and prepping food, can't encourage you enough to spend a little extra money. If nothing else, buy a good chef knife. Spend 40, 50 bucks on a good chef knife. Or, check out this link. I don't get any kind of kickbacks or stipends for it, but in the culinary classes I took, it was a kit that many of the students in my class would buy and use, and the knives held up really good. It's German steel. It was nice. Some other knives that you're going to be looking forward to, the other essentials, are going to be paring knives. So these are two different kinds of paring knives. Obviously, this one's got a slightly shorter blade and more handle. This one, it's like equal, and this is another Chicago Cutlery. It was a collection that my wife had. Again, doesn't hold an edge quite as well as some of the others. And you're going to use this for little things. It's a paring knife, so if you're getting in and cutting something fine, or you're cutting a tomato in your hand, you want to have nice precision and control over the knife. Another big one is we don't see this in America quite as much because we don't really make our own bread, but having a good bread knife, a serrated knife, is going to save you a lot when you're cutting something that's really delicate. You could also use a knife like this for soft fruits, such as a tomato, but they actually do have citrus knives, tomato knives. It's more or less the same thing. The serrations are a little bit closer, the knife's a little smaller, so you can kind of glide through it. And the reason you want a serrated knife, like when you're cutting a tomato, because you don't want to have to apply pressure and smash the fruit. You want to be able to glide through the fruit and just cut it, and that will keep your seeds and your pulp, things like that, intact. So I'm going to move all these extra knives over to the side, out of my way. So I want to talk about, again, the basics of using a chef knife. All those other knives, aside from like the tomato knife and the bread knife, you don't like the paring knives, all that extra stuff. You don't really need a bone paring knife. You don't really need, unless you're going to be processing like whole chickens, bones of ribs, rack of lamb, things of that sort. Like I said, the chef knife, if you are skilled in cutting, you can use one of these for everything. Cutting fruit, cutting chicken, cutting ribs. Obviously, if you're having to cut through a bone, you might need a butcher's knife, what have you, but that's that. So this knife has got some decent weight to it. The handle's a bit heavier. It's solid, good steel. So I'm going to tilt my camera down just a bit so you're not having to look at my mug, but we can focus on these knife cuts just a bit more. So one thing that I want to focus on when you're holding the knife is don't hold the knife back here like you have a death grip on the knife. To have good control of the knife, you can't do much here. You're kind of in like this aggressive chopping mode, right? So to have a good fluid control over the knife, you're actually going to bring your hand all the way up on the hilt, and you're even going to grasp the blade. So notice that my thumb and my forefinger here are actually holding onto the blade. That's kind of what this area of the knife is for, is so that you can create a hold, right? So again, your hand, like my ring finger's up under here, and then my fingers are actually going to be on the blade. I'm not going to have it down on the blade. I'm just demonstrating. So I'm actually going to grasp the blade when I'm cutting things. So One thing that I do want to touch on real quick is when we're cutting something like a potato, right? You don't want to use your shoulder. You want to let the weight of your arm and the weight of your knife do the cutting for you. And this is why it's really important to make sure that you've got a sharp knife with a good edge. If you've got a dull knife, go buy a sharpener or invest in a better knife that's going to hold an edge. So what I mean by don't use your shoulder is a lot of times people go to cut and they pick up their shoulder. See how my shoulder is like coming to my ear? They go here and they're pushing down with all their weight. And that's why you get so tired or fatigued when you're chopping. A much better way to actually cut is to stay nice and neutral. This is going to save your posture if you're spending some time in the kitchen too. But again, holding the blade, you're just going to let your hand glide through the potato. And while you're doing this, it's really, the knife is doing the work. Notice my shoulder stays nice and flat, and I'm just gliding through this potato. Okay, so that's, I think, the number one basic that we've got to be aware of for knife cuts. So, again, we're going to talk about a few different things in this video. Primarily, I want to talk about skills in the kitchen and how to appropriately cut food. So one thing that we talk about a lot, that I hear people talk about a lot, is they have issues chopping food, or they hate, one of the main reasons they hate cooking is because it takes forever to chop the vegetables. And yes, it can if you have a bad knife or bad knife skills. So there's a couple of key knife skills that I want to talk about today. The main one is dicing. So if you like to make potato fries, home fries, there's a couple different ways you can do it. So you can make the longer fries if you want. Hold on, this potato's bad. That end of the potato is bad, sorry. We're gonna switch to another one. So we can make the long fries, we can make little home, like restaurant style fries. So for the long fries, think about cutting your potato in half. Then we're gonna cut it in half again. So now I've got a quarter, and we're gonna turn those quarters on their side. And then we're gonna, again, depending on how thick we want those fries, we're gonna chop them down. Notice they're really thick, so if you want them to be uniformed, we're gonna lay them back onto their side. We're gonna straighten them out with the knife, and we're gonna chop down that middle section. And this gets tricky because now the potato is wet. But now we've got nice, good, long styled fries. So one thing I forgot to talk about that I need to touch on, and I'm gonna turn the camera back down again so that you can kind of see what I'm doing here with a little more clarity. Move this stuff out of the way. Is when we're cutting, it's really important to not have your fingers stretched out. Okay? Draw your fingers back so that your fingernail's almost hidden. So when I'm cutting right here, I can't chop my fingers, right? So I can, and this gives you easy control to hold your food in place, but also will help you prevent from ever getting cut. So always think about kind of keeping those fingers tucked back, if you will. And it just helps immensely whenever you're cutting food. And so this is a different way to make fries. Now I've got little squared fries, right? And I'm making potatoes for meal prep. They're all going to be different shapes and sizes now. But I think this is just an important piece. Now, if you're making like a really nice dinner and you want everything to be uniform, then you're going to want to pay a bit more attention to that, right? So the other piece to this that we can talk about is making diced potatoes or diced onions, whatever it is, right? And a lot of times for people, making diced anything is a trick. And that trick I'm about to show you is a lot more simple than you might believe. And you're going to be like, oh, that's how people do those potatoes. So I'm not the biggest fan of this method simply because it can generate waste if you decide to let there be waste. And guys, I apologize. I'm going to just move this over because I feel like the lighting will be better this way. All right. So to make some good chopped potatoes, think about making this round, kind of whatever shape you want to call this. We're going to chop the sides off every way and make it like, kind of like a square so that it can sit balanced. And so what I mean is we're kind of chopping off these excess sides, and we want to try to give it this square shape as possible. Now, if you want to shave your potatoes ahead of time, or peel the potatoes, because you don't want the skins, you can of course do that. So this is what I mean by the waste, and a lot of places they'll just throw this away and consider it done. I'll chop those up and use them. But, so now we've got this kind of like squared style potato, okay? So I'm gonna chop it in half, right? And I'm gonna chop the side in half, and then I'm gonna chop another side in half. And so now I've got these long sides, and then I'm gonna flip. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna chop, whoop, and I'm gonna chop, I'm gonna chop. And again, keeping in mind, potatoes are moist. You've gotta be smart and be cognizant of this potato's gonna slip. Your knife might slip one way or another. So again, really kind of keeping control, A, of your knife, but also where the potato's going. And then we're chopping in this opposite direction. So the nice thing about this now is all these squares are pretty uniform. I've got some pretty decent squared chopped potatoes. And I know that went kind of fast, so I'm gonna show it to you again. Forgot my vegetable picking up majig. Of course, you can always use your knife. So again, that trick, and I'm gonna go a little slower this time, is we chop the sides off your potatoes, because we wanna make this thing as square and easy to balance as possible. And this also allows you to kind of get most of the skin off if you're someone that doesn't like skin. And so we're gonna chop, 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 chop. Then we're gonna lay it over on its side. And now, so they're cut in half. So we're just, again, chopping and chopping. And this time, we're gonna turn the whole potato around. And this is where the perpendicular cuts come. So the closer you go together, the more fine diced style you're gonna have. The farther apart, obviously, the bigger your potato pieces are gonna be. So I like kind of this medium style chop. So again, now I have pretty uniform square cut potatoes. Makes it really easy if you're gonna roast some potatoes into like certain style fries. Okay, and like I said, with all these, I end up just doing a really quick messy chop and throwing them in with the rest. So again, I talked about earlier, if you want to make like long style fries, you can chop down, then we can chop, 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 chop. And again, notice I'm just gliding my knife through there. I'm not chop, chop, chop. I mean, you can do that. I'm not trying to show off right now. But again, knife controls everything. And then I'll remove one of these, so I've got a flat surface to lay on. And we'll remove that guy. And now we're gonna chop and chop. And so now we've got that longer style fries. It's not too bad. And you can do this same method with doing the square piece, but again, I just don't really like that because you end up with all these weird pieces you gotta go back through and chop. But again, now you can throw these guys onto a cookie sheet or a tin or some foil and bake them, and you've got a little bit more of like a normal fry shape. So that's a pretty easy piece for cutting potatoes, and you can always go back through and chop these down. I'm chopping mine down because this is the way the meal prep's going, and plus when they're in small little cubes, you can kind of cook more at once, which is always nice. But again, you can, like I said, you can do the chops if you want, right? You've got to be prepared to have a bit more control. You're gonna make a bit more of a mess, and you know that's just got to be something that you're prepared to do or want to do, or to practice, and it is fun. But again, always your discretion on how you want to go about it. But again, knife skills are everything in the kitchen. If you're gonna spend a lot of time cooking, you've got to be efficient with speed. Otherwise, you're gonna be chopping vegetables forever, and nobody likes to chop vegetables all day while they're in the kitchen. So the next one I'm gonna show you is an onion. Stand by. All right, so let's talk onions, because nobody likes cutting onions. So I've already peeled this onion, washed it, what have you. So these ends, don't cut them off quite yet. We can trim them a little bit and get that extra shit off. But we want to leave this little knot here. I'm going to move this off to the side. So we're going to cut the onion straight in half. And this is the most efficient way that you can, this layer just screwed up. So this is going to be the most efficient way that you can dice an onion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be cutting this way into the onion, but I'm going to do it while it's flat. So I'm going to control my blade, starting at the very bottom, which I'm going to cut into the onion. I went a little too low that time. And you don't want to cut all the way through, but you want to cut most way to the back and slide your knife out. And you gotta be tricky or careful when you come up to the top. It's a little tricky. And then you're gonna turn it, and then we're gonna cut this way. And again, closer you cut together this direction is gonna be mandating. This is where things get hairy, right? And onion slides off. It's not good for anybody. It's how you cut yourself. So this is where you gotta be careful. But again, the closer you are this way, it's gonna be mandating how big the cubes are, or the dice of your onion. And then we're gonna turn it back, and then we just chop all the way down. And you'll notice that this will dice your onion for you, and very few, see this onion's super slippery, cuts. But again, gotta be careful with onions and potatoes because they're slippery. The skins come off, things like that. But for the most part, all this stuff diced out pretty well. Sorry, I was not talking there for a second. My eyes are burning. This is a super fresh onion. Then you can go through these extra ones and just cut them down as you need. This extra shit I usually just throw away because I don't like the texture of it when it cooks. I'm gonna grab a bowl. Woo, cutting onions suck, guys. I don't know about you, but I am crying. Alright, put all this stuff away. And then, let's demonstrate again. You want to, the side with the knot is going to be the side, the back end. So we're going to cut towards that guy. And as you get more efficient at this, you can generally start moving just a little bit faster. So I'm going to chop down, down, down. Try to hold the onion in place. So as you start fraying the onion, it does start sliding a bit more, but you'll notice there's already like chopped pieces coming off. And this again is where it's super important to have control of your knife and do the best you can. See, again, these top ones will always slide off to get there. And then for the most part, all that onion is chopped. So chopping onions are not that hard. You obviously don't have to chop it this way, but it is super efficient. Of course, you can do many other methods. Basically, as long as you're comfortable and like your efficiency and speed, then you're kind of good to go, you know? So other options you can do to cut onions, of course, is we can chop the ends off entirely. Get rid of that stuff. Then we can chop it in half. And then we can chop this way. This might be something you'd want to do for like garnishes or burgers, things of that sort, because you get those nice long half onion ring styles. You know, just chop around that to get rid of it. And then if you want like rough cuts or chops or what have you, you can just kind of go back through, chop all this down. And it's not as uniform now, but some people like this method as well. And now again, we've more or less got a rough chop on the onion. And again, I wouldn't say it's any more or less efficient. It's more just about whatever you become comfortable with. I maybe should have grabbed a slightly larger bowl, but this is where we're at the moment. So guys, I hope this video over knife skills, chopping potatoes, onions, has been beneficial. I appreciate any likes and subscriptions to my channel. I'm gonna grab another bowl. I gotta take a break because if you can't tell, my eyes are on fire. Anyways, guys, appreciate your time as always. Take care. Woo!